So again, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, right now. You might be wondering why I decided to talk about Rings of Power for this particular video. And I'll get into a little bit of that. So I have one of my dearest friends. She made it possible. She helped me get tickets to the screening for the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power, and it was going to be playing at a few select theaters for one day only. And I had been keeping tabs on the show, but if I'm being honest, I wasn't super excited about it, but just because it's going to be really hard to top or even match the majesty that is Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings films. So any new thing that seems to be tapping into live action Middle Earth, I'm wary of. Like a lot of people were. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm not the only fan who was a little skeptical about the idea of an Amazon show about anything to do with Middle Earth. Having said that, I was curious, even if I wasn't super excited about it. So I'm treating this as a movie review because I got those tickets to go see it on the big screen. And having seen the first 2 episodes now, I'll say this. And what I'm about to say is not a secret. It's not surprising. The best thing about what the Rings of Power offers is its supreme execution in the way of visuals. This is a beautiful looking offering. It really is. And my concern was that it wouldn't match what Peter Jackson and his crew did for the Lord of the Rings movies. And I think by extension, the Hobbit films. While there's a certain look to the Hobbit films that is almost overly vibrant. There's a richness in the colors on screen. There is a sharpness to the details that's more sharp, more sort of prominent than even in the original trilogy of films. And I think the Amazon show sort of continued in that vein, meaning continuing from what we got in the Hobbit films, with the vibrancy and the richness of color and detail, which just really it pushes the look of Middle Earth forward in that way. As for like on live action, as far as live action offerings go, it's a beautiful situation. That's probably I think one of the strongest things about the show. That's it. That's the review. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. The next best thing I think I would have to say is I can't remember her name, but the actor who plays Galadriel, I think she's very sound. She's very strong. I like her a lot. Now I don't know if I'm alone in this. I was skeptical. You're touching on, Galadriel is, Kate Blanchett. It's hard to imagine anyone else in the role, no matter at what age. Yes, this is a younger Galadriel. we're being exposed to, and we're seeing her in a different way, and I think because this Galadriel is not the one we're familiar with. It's I'm willing to let it ride. I'm letting it ride because we have someone who's actually quite good. I think she's good. There are a few other actors that are strong too. I think the if there's an issue at all, the first issue, I think, is in the writing. I'm not quite sure how much you know about sort of what's going on behind the scenes in terms of source material, but Rings of Power is taking a lot of sort of inspiration from the appendices of the Lord of the Rings books. Meaning, if you have any fans out there will know what I'm talking about, but if you haven't, I don't know, specific editions of the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the original books, some of them will have the one I have, certainly the one I have the release from somewhere around 2002-ish, something like that, when the movies were coming out. The original, 2002, 2003-ish. My books, at the end of Return of the King, there is a long section of the appendices, which deals with pieces throughout sort of the history of Middle-earth, from I think the First Age to the Third Age. So there are mentions to the Silmarillion. There are mentions of things that take place, thousands of years prior to the events of Lord of the Rings. There are there's family trees. There's a huge area of information that deals with sort of languages, like the Dwarvish, Elvish. There's sections that talk about the alphabet and how to pronounce certain words, and it's quite fascinating. So, Rings of Power is primarily dealing with that and whatever else they have the rights to. So, the rights to sort of stuff that we've already seen. I don't believe that the team behind Rings of Power has the permission to use anything out of the Silmarillion or anything else. And I think when you know that, at least for me, knowing that helps me soften up a little bit on some of the restrictions sort of that I had on it, which is I'm always leery when new shows or movies that are coming out that deal with characters that we're familiar with. And the feeling is that it won't add anything new to the character we already know. You can only tell us stuff before the time we met them because they're like different characters in a sense. They have pieces of the character we know, and we're getting to see how they become the character we know. So whatever, like that can be interesting, but it's not always. I don't think it's always worth the effort if you can't bring us anything new, which is my problem with the Obi-Wan series. If you've seen that video, I talked a bit about not necessarily Obi-Wan, although there are slight issues with the character of how they portray him in that stage of his life, but primarily with the inclusion of Princess Leia and all of that. Similarly, the case could be made for it being a problem having Galadriel and then Elrond, characters we know, in being portrayed. I would have preferred, like with Star Wars or any of the other sort of properties that do this kind of thing, that revisit earlier things. I would have preferred that, Middle Earth is a big place. You could have told the story from any other perspective, any other character that we don't know. and have Galadriel or someone on the side um, making an appearance, but not have the show build around that, or not have that person be the main character. For instance, I would have preferred if you could have made up an elf to have the story revolve around. Because there's stuff in the appendices that there's no details for that stuff. This is the appendices is sort of it is like it gives you some bullet points to things that have happened in time throughout Middle Earth. So the show attempts to fill in the gaps, and this goes back to what my issue is with the writing. The and no disrespect to the writing team on the show, but I think when you have bullet points, you can say, hey, this happens at point A and this happens at point C or whatever it is. So how do you get from point A to C? You have to make up a point B and make up sort of anchor points in between those places to get there. So in a way, for a writer, the potential for that is fun. Like as a writer myself, I understand the lure of, I think, the excitement really of, like, you have plot points to write to, and if you've immersed yourself in the world enough, you can you can stretch your arms a little bit, stretch your wings again a bit, and play in the world of Middle Earth and explore it, and you can come up with some good things. Sometimes things don't work, probably, and sometimes things could be you can transcend the confines of what you're working with without deviating too far from the spirit of that. And I think ultimately the show keeps within the spirit of it in terms of writing, but because you're using the appendices and there's like you have to fill in the blanks. There's a lot there are spaces within these first two episodes where it feels like there is filler. You're trying to fill the space with stuff before you get to major plot pieces or major action pieces, whatever it is. And that is that's not what I was expecting. To say the least, I wasn't expecting that, and so I was a little let down by that. I would have preferred maybe if there was more, some space for action, right? In the ways of action, there's not a lot of action, and in a way that's good. There's one major sequence, I think, in the first episode, in a montagey thing, and there's one sort of proper action sequence in that first half, that first episode. Outside of that, there is a fair bit of jumping around. I think part of that can makes the show disjointed a little bit. You're not fully comfortable with what is where you are, placement in terms of location wise. That's the other thing. There's a lot of locations in these first two episodes, so there's a fair bit of bouncing around, and you're wondering who we're focusing on, because it's a show. And there's room for multiple characters to come in and have their arc, whatever. There's a fair bit going on in that way, where we go in knowing, hey, Galadriel's the character. She's the person we're supposed to be following. But then the show does show us areas. You have Elrond, who has his own situation. You've got members of the Harfoot community, who I think they're probably they're early hobbits. You have that group there. You have another elf who has a interesting dynamic with a human, a non. So she's like a regular person. You have a couple different threads going on, and that's interesting. And what is it, 8 episodes I think it's going to be total. the hope is that there's going to be to find a way to focus the story a bit. I'm on the fence right now. I think whether or not I want to continue watching. I probably will, just because I'm curious now. But I think, yeah, the hope is that there's gonna be some focused storytelling, um, to get it to a place where it can be stronger if it doesn't feel like there's fluff, or like filler. And the first two episodes do feel like there's a bit of, filler in there. So that's, it is what it is. Other things that are good, I think there are some great sequences that look really visually splendid. The end of the first episode uh, is very strong. There's not a lot of dialogue, and I'll just say this: the elves are on a ship on the way traveling somewhere, and that sequence is beautifully executed, well acted, and it feels grand, and that was it was really good too. That was cool. That was great. Episode 2 has really good stuff with Elrond visiting the dwarves. That whole sequence, when he's able to go into the mines, or into the mountain, and we see where the dwarves are living. It's quite beautiful, and the music is great too. And I would say that's the other thing that's good about the show. The score of the show is very good. It's just very strong, and that's probably the next best thing. So there's visuals, and then the music. Those things help make it feel like Middle Earth, and it helps make it feel sound enough to where, okay, I'm willing to embark on this journey. Episode 2 stuff is serious, very good. There's also some good character stuff with Elrond and his dwarf friend. I can't remember his name. I knew his name. Really good character stuff. That's so yeah, I was with that. But overall, it's not terrible. Rings of Power, you could do a lot worse than Rings of Power. My understanding is it's probably not as good as House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones prequel, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm open to stepping into that. But that's where we are. Rings of Power. I'd say if you're curious, watch it. If you're a fan, check it out. Because there's probably going to be a couple things in there that you might be curious about. So yeah, Rings of Power, check it out. All right, that's going to do it for this video. But thank you for tuning in. If you've made it this far, I appreciate your time. And I'll be back with another video. Meantime, I'm out of here.